Hello, my loves. Welcome to another episode of the With Love from Liv podcast. My name is Liv, and I love that you're here. Thank you so much for joining me. It has been a little bit since my last podcast episode. I know they're getting a little more intermittent than they used to be, but I have a pretty good excuse. I was out in Italy for a couple of weeks. I was picking up my little brother from his mission. And it was really special to do that. It was my parents' first time visiting Italy. They got to come. It was Christian's first time visiting Italy. And so just getting to pick up my little brother to meet his mission president and some people that meant a lot to him on his mission. And then also just being able to experience Italy with my parents, with my husband for the first time, was really magical. It wasn't my first time visiting Italy because actually my older brother also served his mission there. And I went with him and his wife a few years ago to revisit his mission. Needless to say, the Lord really wants my family to do work over in Italy. So it was cool. My parents did baptisms for a bunch of temple names. So it was just all around really, really a great experience. And I think a pretty decent excuse for not getting on here for a bit. But one other thing that happened while I was over in Italy was I ended up talking with a couple who, with the husband, of one of my oldest friends. And I don't mean age-wise because I live in St. George and I kid you not, palling around with women who are in their 50s and 60s. And they're great. I love them. But I was talking with the husband of one of the first girls I ever made friends with in my whole life. We met in the first grade and have just been in contact ever since. And he was telling me about how he and his wife listen to this podcast all the time. And it, first of all, really touched me. Thank you guys. You know who you are. But also it just kind of got me to thinking about the content that I want to create and share here, because obviously as a dating coach is kind of my first title. I focus a lot on singles, and I know that the majority of my audience is singles. But with that being true, what's also true is I do have couples that tune in, and I also have been working with the majority of my clients this year. They've all been divorced. And so I have just been thinking, what if I started incorporating a lot more content on what to do within relationships? Because I love to talk about the work to get into a relationship and to make dating fun and all of that. But it's just something that I've been thinking about for several months, and having this conversation with my friend's husband really kind of clicked for me that I also want to connect more with couples, because as I have been working with so many divorced singles and knowing that couples are tuning into this podcast, into my content, I know that there's this huge piece missing when it comes to relationship building and how to create relationships that last. And what I've been thinking about around all of that is that we kind of as a whole, as a society, are confusing connection with relationship building. So I recently saw somebody say that a connection is not something you can build. It's something that either is there or it's not. And I've been thinking a lot about that. And I think I would tend to agree with that. I think that when it comes to what a connection is, that's a lot of kind of the feelings, the chemistry, the attraction, a lot of that is actually going to come down to genetics. Of course, if you've been following me, you know that I'm a big believer you can change a lot of who you're attracted to. But that being said, genetics do play a role, right? And so there are things to just be conscious of, be aware of. For example, pheromones, how somebody smells to you. You may not know this. That actually is wholly like your primitive brain that comes into play when you meet people, and how they smell to you. Like if you've ever met somebody and you were like, this person just like stinks, like they might have fine hygiene, but their cologne makes me want to die, or, you know, whatever. And what's interesting about that is that your senses on a very subconscious level are telling you that that person who smells bad is going to be a bad match. So if you are connecting with someone and I mean, they could have just gone to the gym, they could have just gone for a run, they could be sweaty and smelly, and you could still be like, you know what? I like that. That's good stuff. And the reason being is because your senses and the way that someone smells to you is playing a role in whether or not you're attracted to them, right? So kind of a tangent, but I think that's interesting, and a lot of people don't actually know that. But there's that piece that's very feelings based. And I think a lot of that is inherent. So when you meet somebody and it's kind of like your souls just match, or you just like feel this instant warmth with them, that's going to be an indicator of a really good connection for the most part. However, even if you have a really good connection, that does not mean that it's going to translate into a lasting relationship. And I think that that bridge is where I want to start showing up more, and creating content and helping couples kind of bridge between those two things. Because especially in LDS culture, couples tend to get married really fast, and they tend to get married based on this initial connection that they feel. And then we're also seeing this huge group of people that are getting divorced. And I'm not really here to say that divorce is good or bad, but I am here to say that it is avoidable. For the most part, it is very much avoidable. And what's missing is that people are trying to rely on a connection and thinking that that will take them through to the long term, and it won't. And here's why. Because the connection piece is very emotions based, but the relationship building aspect, those are skills that you need to develop. And this is where things come into play, such as trust. Oh my gosh. So my husband and I, we were watching Love is Blind. I think it's just awful. As you probably know, I think all dating shows are awful. And yet I just can't help but watch them. Oh my gosh, it's like a train wreck. And so we were watching Love is Blind, and these people are getting married, never having seen each other, never having smelled each other. Huge red flag there, right? And they are just deciding, hey, like, you make me feel really good. We have a really good connection. Let's get married. And if you watched season 2 of that show, you will note that not one single couple from that season stayed together. Literally not one. So, you know, we were just kind of analyzing, like, why is that? Because in theory, I think it's a terrible idea. But I mean, I get why it's interesting as a show and whatever. And the concept of, you know, are we as a society hyper focused on looks? And I think that, yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on that could shift. But number one, nobody is building trust in those pods, in the culture where you're getting married really fast. You don't actually have the depth of relationship to know if this is somebody that you trust, right? And it's true that when you get married, you can build the trust, and that's your prerogative if that's what you want to do. However, for me, I was very much in a place where I was like, I don't want to enter into a long-term commitment if I don't know that I can trust my partner. And so that was a very conscious decision that Christian and I both made when we were dating. And, you know, if you don't know, if you're new here, we dated for over a year before we got engaged. And in LDS culture world, that's like forever, right? And the thing is that we wanted to work on the skills portion of our relationship before we decided to get married. Because for me, and as a dating coach, this is what I encourage my clients to do, is to use the relationship as a testing period. Okay, and I want to be clear, I don't mean to test your partner. I very much mean that when you're in the relationship, that's where you get to see where you're both at in the kind of key components of relationship building, which I'll get into. And a lot of people I see don't give themselves that space to test and work on the skills portion. And they're just relying on the connection. And then they're devastated when their relationship falls apart. And I mean, as a coach, also as someone who has seen a lot of her friends get divorced, a lot of people will say, well, we fell out of love. Well, you know, we just grew apart. And I think that both of those things are entirely preventable if you can work on these relationship components and make sure that there's something that you two do well together before you get married, right? So yes, connection is important, but it's only going to take you so far, right? If you have a connection, but you don't have the actual components of what makes a relationship last, then you're not going to be able to make the relationship last. And the opposite is true as well. Like, you can have really good relationship building skills, but if there's no connection, if there's no like attraction to your partner, which I have noticed there's kind of this huge push to like say that attraction doesn't matter. No, it does. 100% it does. It's not everything. And you don't need to like base your whole decision about whether you are going to be with somebody or not on their looks, but it does matter, right? Because like sex is part of a relationship, right? Intimacy is part of a relationship. That matters. If you do not want to have sex with your partner, find a different partner, please. But those components of what makes a relationship last are, number one, do you each feel the ability and the space to meet your own needs independently together? So let me just emphasize on that. Your partner is not responsible for meeting all of your needs. And I don't want you to get that twisted, because yes, in a committed relationship, in a marriage, I tell my husband I want to have sex, and that's him technically fulfilling a need for me. But I'm advocating for it, right? Or he is. And so that's something that we are open about and say when we want it, right? But I'm not there just expecting him to like get down with me all the time, no matter what. Like it's much more intentional than that. And the same is true with love languages. Oh my gosh, I have been ranting about this on all of my social medias, but like quality time, words of affirmation, like gifts, all of that. I am not over here like my husband has to give me all of this quality time. My husband has to, dote on me with words of affirmation. He has to give me all of these gifts, or else he doesn't love me. Right. I have had, and yes, I did start out thinking that. Right. And it has taken a lot of learning, a lot of hard conversations, a lot of grace to get to a place where I can be like, wait, I don't actually need my husband to like buy stuff for me. I can buy stuff for me. And then that's, like, I'm fine with that. That is not a big deal. And he can buy stuff for him. And like, sometimes we'll do that for each other, but for the most part, we kind of just do it ourselves. And then it's like, I'm not putting that pressure on him of, you have to get me like the perfect birthday present, or else I think you don't love me, or you're not spending enough time with me, therefore you don't love me, right? Like, it gives so much more space for people to be people, and to be able to recognize your own needs and to ask for what you need, right? So that's important. Is sometimes getting your need met doesn't literally mean doing it for yourself. Sometimes it means asking for it from your partner, but it can't be this expectation that they're just going to know, or that they're just going to do it all the time because you expect that, but you haven't communicated that, and so they don't know, right? So that's a big piece that I see is missing a lot, is that singles and couples just expect somebody else to know how they need to be loved without them communicating it, or without them feeling like they can communicate it more than once. The whole, like, if I tell him once and then he doesn't step up, like, see you later. Ooh, so toxic. That's so bad. Like, give people a chance to be human, right? And if you have a conversation multiple times and you see no effort or no change or no attempt for things to be different, that's a different conversation. But if you're like, hey, I need this thing, and they try and they fail, and then you bounce because they failed one time, like, that's on you. Okay, you got to straighten that out. So that is a huge, huge component. Can you each advocate for and make sure your needs are being met independently, but together, right? Oops, I'm gonna knock over my shelf. Component number 2 is, do you have shared values? This is going to look like religion. This is going to look like politics. This is going to look like, how do you want to raise your kids? That's not to say that if you have different views on politics or different religions or whatever, that it can't work. There just are going to have to be a lot more conversations and a lot more effort getting you two on the same page. And I mean, it will just be easier. Like, to be frank, it will just be easier if you guys are aligned in your core views and values, right? Number 3 is, do you have a shared vision of the life that you want together, right? So when you are thinking in the long term, are you both working towards the same thing? Are you both working towards the same goals? Because if you're not, if you're over here thinking like, oh, I'm going to have a beach house in Jamaica, like, that's my goal, that's my dream, that's everything I'm working towards. And he's like, well, I want to have a cabin in Alaska. Then you guys are working towards different things, and you need to align that vision together. It's very much about lifestyle, but it's also about do you believe in eternity? Right? Because if you're over here like eternity is my goal, and exaltation forever, that's what I'm working towards, and your partner's like, yeah, I'm just in it for the temporary. You guys have different visions of what you want for your relationship, and thus you're going to behave in a way that doesn't align with each other. So something to be aware of. these are conversations that you can, and in my opinion, you need to have before you make a commitment that's long term. Because like I want to be trusting of people, but I have also been around long enough to know that there are people who are so desperate for love that they will lie, and that doesn't necessarily always mean that they're a bad person. But it's hard to keep up a charade for a long period of time. And so I'm not saying that you have to date forever just in case your partner's lying to you. Rather, I'm saying that if somebody meets you and they're just captivated by you and you have this like beautiful connection, and a lot of people are so obsessed with the like, fireworks, lightning strike, blah, blah, blah thing, which I think doesn't actually really matter. And you get swept up in that moment, and then you get married. And this is so common in the people that I coach, is why I'm bringing it up. You get swept up in the connection piece and you haven't worked on the relationship building. And then 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year down the line, your partner just becomes like a completely different person. That's because we can only fake it for so long, right? And so if you're like caught up in the feelings and the emotions of, this is the most incredible person that I've ever met, I must do anything to keep them. And then you get them into a marriage, and then you're like, okay, well, I got them, so now I can be who I really am. And then you kind of take off the mask, and yikes for your partner, right? So make sure that you give time to see who somebody really is. And that's I think I'm on component number 3 or 4 of relationship building is, do you have the space and the safety to be who you really are, right? Are you able to show up and trust this other person? Which, going back to the Love is Blind, literally only one couple this season has said, I love you because I trust you. And maybe I just am a skeptic, because I'm like, how do you know if you trust them? You've never been in a situation where you need to. But that, like, at least one couple acknowledged that they need that. None of the other couples did. And if you don't have trust with the other person, then what do you have, right? Trust is huge. And if you haven't given your relationship enough time and space and seasons and situations where you get to build trust together, then you're going to rely on this connection piece. And connection does not mean trust. And so at some point, it's going to come to a head. And either you have a connection and you have worked to build trust together so that when things come up, when the winter rolls around, when trials are present in your life together, as they will be, you can rely on each other because you have a foundation of trusting each other. Or you're going to be like, well, I don't trust you, and now I don't love you, right? Like, the trust isn't there, and now I feel betrayed. Now I feel crappy. Now I don't feel good in this relationship. So now it has killed the connection piece, because how you feel has changed. So I hope that this is helping to illustrate a picture of what's necessary to build within relationships. In addition to the connection, there are also these other components that make a relationship last. I did do a podcast episode several weeks ago on like developing these skills. But I am actually hosting a workshop for couples to focus on these components. And whether you are in a relationship already, you're married, you've been married for a few years, and you're struggling and you're like, am I looking at divorce? Right? Or you're new, maybe you're strong, but you want to kind of preempt yourself against, those things that commonly tear relationships apart. That's what the workshop is for. So we're going to go into things that breaks couples apart, namely money, vision, intimacy, and conflict resolution. These are all things that I have heard from divorced singles, specifically from couples who are struggling, that tears them apart, that breaks their relationship. And these things are all what wasn't discussed here in these components of a long-lasting relationship. A shared value system, that's going to come from, are you on the same page with your finances? Right? A lot of couples do not ever get on the same page with how they feel about money, and it will rip you apart. Right? It most of the time, if you guys cannot align, that is a very common thing that will break couples up, right? Like couples who break up. Okay, this is the better way to say it. Couples that break up, more often than not, money is a factor. Okay. Another thing that I hear a lot, having been married, being married, and talking with new couples, if I bring up boundaries around sex, boundaries around intimacy, boundaries around anything, I will literally have couples that are like, who has boundaries in marriage? Oh my gosh, you need to. You have to have boundaries in marriage. Okay. You have to have boundaries all the time for all relationships, because your boundaries are about you. Your boundaries are there to give you the space that you need to be who you want to be. Okay. So if you don't have boundaries, you're not who you want to be. I promise you that. So if you are interested in learning about this, then I do invite you to send me a DM on Instagram. Just reach out and tell me you're interested in the couples workshop. This is something I'm going to be opening soon. I don't have an official date quite yet. I have some other things going on. But I want to be someone who is a voice for singles as well as for couples, right? Like my job overall, which this is the coolest thing ever, right? That I get to say that my job is your love, right? Like that's what I'm focused on, is how much love can you feel in your life? And I want to be there to support you, whether you're in a season of singleness or you're in the season of marriage or relationships. Because in either season, it has to be a priority. And a lot of people will think, these singles will say, well, when I get married, I'll make my happiness and feeling love and feeling fulfilled and all of that, then I'll make it a priority, right? And then over here, I hear couples who will say, well, since I'm married, I don't really have to worry about it. Like, I'll just be happy because I'm married. Nope, you won't. Like, happiness is something that has to be a priority for you. Love has to be something that is a priority for you. Independence, boundaries, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel like you can be yourself, that gets to be a priority for you, whether you're single or married. And in either situation, or I should say, if you're single or you're in a relationship, in either situation, if you are kind of depending on your circumstances or waiting on your circumstances to change or whatever it is, you're externalizing the love that you get to feel, the fulfillment that you get to feel, the happiness that you get to feel, then you're not going to have it. Even when your circumstances change, you're not going to have it because you're not going to know how. So that's what I want to help with That's what my intention with this podcast episode, with all of my podcast episodes and YouTube videos and, all of my content overall. It's an attempt to show you how much love you can feel regardless of the season that you're in. Okay. That's my intention. That's my goal for you. If you want to dive into that with me, then my one-on-one is full at this point. I'm not doing any more one-on-one until later into next year, but I will be hosting multiple workshops. I will be creating what can be accessible to you in other dynamics. And that's going to start with this couples workshop. If you're a single and you're interested in the material, then you can also reach out to me and we can kind of talk about some other ideas I have for you to have access and to not feel weird like you're the only single in this like couples group. But either way, love is available to you. You can make a relationship last. You can work on a connection and on what it takes to build a relationship that's forever. And I can help you do it. Okay, I want to. Let me know if that is something that you're interested in. You can leave a comment here and I will respond to you. Or you can reach out to me on any of my social medias. I am here for your love. Okay, I'm here for you to feel loved. That's what I should say. So thank you for being on this journey with me. I see you. I'm excited that you're here. I'm excited that you're interested in feeling more love in your life. And I want to be part of that in any way that I can. So I will talk to you soon. All my love.